Hello and welcome to this brief video showing the build-up of a walk cycle for one of the characters in the game we're currently developing called Her Majesty's Spiffing. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with 3D animation, the program I'm using is called Maya, and we conveniently already have a character and a rig set up, ready to animate. Now this character is called Alid. Now you can typically tell quite a lot about a character and their mood by observing their walk or their gait. The walk we're going to build up here is quite laid back, quite loose. That'll be used when Alid is following our main protagonist, Captain Frankly English, as he goes about his errands in game. He'll be kind of floating about in the background, so he doesn't need to be doing anything too dramatic. Just a nice casual walk in a world of his own. So the first thing we'll have to do is get him out of his idle position and into one of our walking key poses. Now, I like to start off by positioning the character as he would be positioned in his first contact position. This is the point when the forward foot initially makes contact with the floor. So he'll make contact with his heel on his front foot, while his rear foot will be sitting on its toes, just ready to push the character forward. And once we're finished, we should end up with something that looks kind of like this. Now the next step, boom boom, is this thing on? is moving the character forward and making our initial complete cycle. Now, when I'm blocking out a walk, I tend to work quite mathematically at the start, because we want our walk to look quite uniform. As it's going to repeated loads. We don't want any distracting movements, such as one foot moving quicker than the other. I like to work out the length of each step, and then in the channel box on the right hand side of the screen here, just actually type in the values, the translate values, the distance that the foot's going to move, to ensure that the character moves the same distance in each footstep. I'll set up the contact position for the start of my cycle, then scrub to the middle of my sequence and set up the contact position for the opposite foot, and then finally scrub to the end of my sequence and set up a pose exactly the same as the initial contact position, just obviously with the character having moved forward. Now, just to make sure that the forward motion of the hips and of my character is constant, what I'll typically do is just jump into my graph editor here and straighten out the translate curve for the direction the character is moving. So, for example, in this case, I'm moving the character forward using translate Z, so it's along the Z axis, rather than the character ease in to each keyframe where they slow down just before they reach that new position. I want them to move at a constant speed. Now, obviously, the cycle is going to be a lot easier to edit with the character in one place rather than moving forward. So the next thing I'll do is grab this yellow diamond-shaped controller to move the entire character. And what I'll do is I'll move it the same distance that I've moved the character forward, just pulling him backwards. So that's cool. We have a walk cycle now, but it doesn't look great. Everything is obviously very rigid looking at the moment. So the next thing that we want to do is add a bit more movement to the character's hips. At the moment, the hips are always the same height off the ground. We want, as the character makes contact with the ground on his front foot and starts to push off, or gets ready to push off with his rear foot, that his hips continue to drop down slightly. And then as the character pushes himself up, as he lifts his rear leg and as the leg passes, this back leg coming forward, passes the center of his body, we want his hips to be thrust up. Eventually we should end up with a nice smooth arc as his hips move up and down as the character pushes himself forward and then drops to repeat the process again. We'll also work on the feet in a little bit more detail now. So after that initial contact position, the foot will come flat down onto the ground as the character moves forward. The same foot will gradually move up onto its toes, just getting ready to propel the character forward again. So things are starting to improve, but we still have quite a bit more work to do. The body is still quite rigid looking, and there's also this slight popping in his legs that we'll want to fix. Also, as his foot pushes forwards, we want to make that look a lot more explosive. We also want, as the character moves his leg forward, that it swings out away from the other leg very slightly, just so as not to clip it. So the character, there's no chance of them tripping up as they bring their back leg forward. Notice as well that earlier on I actually moved the hips to the left and the right, so they're not, so they're always leaning more over the foot that's supporting the weight of the character. And we also want to really do a bit more work on the foot here as our character pushes himself off the ground, just to, really convey the fact that he's physically pushing himself forwards. At that point, whenever his toes leave the ground, we want to make it look like it's forcing the character forward. So after quite a bit of work on the feet, things are starting to look a lot more natural and a lot more fluid. And we just want to tidy up the hips a bit, give them a little bit of rotation, left and right, a little bit of sway, just to try and smooth out all of this motion. So this is looking better, but because we haven't done any work to the top of the character's body, around his chest, the fact his hips are actually swaying more now makes him seem even more rigid than before. We'll look at fixing that in a minute, but first we'll add a little bit of overlapping animation to the character's forearms. We want the character to seem quite loose, so his hands and his forearms will be lagging a little bit behind the upper arm. Now we don't want to go overboard with this overlapping animation. We don't want it to look too cartoony. This motion should be quite subtle, so we'll add this little bit of lag just to smooth out the arm movement. Also, something that's very important is that we want to make sure that these tangents of our keyframes at the start and at the end of our cycle are the same. We want basically the momentum that our motion is carrying at the end of the cycle to continue at the beginning of the following one. So we're getting close to completion now. We just need to sort out that upper body and maybe add a little bit of motion to the head and the hands just before quickly going over everything once again and just tidying everything up. Now while we're looking up the upper body, we'll also add a little twist to the top of the arms around the shoulders as the character's arms swing backwards and forwards. And perhaps quickly we'll add a bit more work on the hips just to have the character dip forward and down and then up and back out of each step, just to make things look that little bit more fluid. Then we'll compensate for the twisting on the hips by moving the chest to try and maintain the character facing forward during the walk. So his chest is always going to be pointed forward, the direction he's traveling. Now we've probably went a little bit overboard with the forward and back motion of the hips. So we'll just pull up the graph editor here quickly and tweak these values. While we're in here, we'll just quickly smooth out the rest of the curves on the other various controls of the body a bit, just to try and achieve a slightly less rigid motion. So we're getting close to finish now. We've a bit more work to do on the upper body and the hands though. But we've certainly came quite a distance in a relatively short amount of time. So we'll just maybe very quickly look at the chest here a little bit more. we just want to add a little bounce to the head as the character comes up from the ground just before dropping back down again. Nothing too extreme, obviously, just something quite subtle. Something quick that I like to do when trying to get some overlapping animation is first set the extreme poses of, well, for example, in this case, the hands, and then copy and paste the keyframes in the graph editor. So basically, I've got 2 cycles in my graph editor. Then what I can do is I can just grab all those keyframes, and if I move them backwards, this will make the motion happen sooner, or if I push them forward, it'll actually delay it a bit. And finally, after about an hour, we end up with something that looks like this, all ready to be dropped into the game engine. Well, hopefully you found all of that informative. If you want to see what Alad looks like moving in game, do visit our Kickstarter campaign page. Simply head to kickstarter.com and search for HM Spiffing, and you should find us easily enough. And on our campaign page, you'll be able to download a demo of our game, and heck, if you like what you see, why not pledge and help ensure that this jovial space-themed adventure game gets made? Thanks for your time.